The house used to hum with love. Every wall bore pieces of our story: birthday photos, Christmas smiles, graduation gowns. Now, the frames have thinned. One by one, my face has quietly disappeared from the center walls. The laughter still comes, but it doesn't linger in my presence, not like it used to. I was setting the table again this Sunday. Same dishes, same placemats, same rhythm, but nothing about it felt the same. My hands moved out of memory, not desire. The greens were too salty. The roast overcooked. I used to care. Now I just make sure there's enough. That's it. Talindra breezed through the kitchen like it belonged to her, eyes full of judgment, arms empty of help. She never offered, not once, just watched with those narrowed lids, then sat herself down as if her presence was a gift. And I stayed quiet, because what else does a mother do when her daughter-in-law acts like the queen of a castle she didn't build? The doorbell rang. Voices followed, Keenan's loud chuckle, his hand slapping somebody's back. They came in full of weekend energy and laughter until I walked in from the kitchen. Then it thinned, like air sucked out of a room. Conversations clipped and smiles tightened. They saw me, but not one of them really looked. I placed the cornbread basket down when it came, loud, sharp. She just sits around now, Talindra said, looking at me like I was a worn-out chair taking up space. Keenan laughed, not with amusement but with agreement, then sipped his tea. No one said a word, not Aunt Gwen, not the cousins, not even Keenan. The insult floated, then landed, on me. I didn't flinch, didn't say a thing, just adjusted the napkins like her words didn't sting. But they did, every one of them. I heard them echoing in my own bones. Once I was the backbone, I told myself. Now I am treated like borrowed furniture. They all kept chewing. I glanced over. Keenan wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he muttered, "Mama just needs to rest." Said it like a joke, but it wasn't one, not to me. This was the boy I walked to school. The boy whose college loans I co-signed. The boy who called me crying when he wrecked his first car. And now he was protecting her, not me. Shielding her judgment instead of shielding me from it. Blood or image. That was the war in his head, and blood was losing. A silent child can wound louder than any enemy. That thought hit me like cold steel. Dinner continued, but I was no longer in it. I moved through the motions, refilling glasses, clearing empty plates, like a ghost in my own home. I stepped out onto the porch, apron still on, a breeze picked up, brushing against the sweat on my face. I didn't cry. That was new. When did motherhood turn into invisibility? I whispered to no one. Then I remembered something my husband once told me, long before cancer took his voice. Never let them decide when your story ends. I closed my eyes, took a breath, not a vow, not a speech, just breath. Then walked back in. I wasn't sure what shifted, but something had. Dinner finished, the house emptied. No one hugged me goodbye. I walked to my room and opened the drawer to grab the church envelope, but when I pulled out my bank ledger, a number jumped out. Something was off. I flipped the pages, checked again. Where did that money go? The book closed with a soft thud, but something deeper inside me, it cracked open. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I laid in my bed, eyes wide open, listening to the creaks of the house I built and bought, where now I felt like an unwelcome guest. Talindra's voice echoed, sharper than the clinking of silverware from that dinner. She just sits around now. That kind of poison don't leave your bones easy. It lingers. I sat up before the sun. My body ached like it knew what I was about to find. I reached for my old checkbook, same one I used since my nursing days, back when keeping track of every dime meant something. I wasn't looking for trouble, just trying to confirm how much I'd set aside for church. But there it was, big as daylight, a withdrawal for $12,000, then another, $18,000, more after that. All totaled, it came to $48,000 gone. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just stared. I wasn't panicked, I was cold. Something in me turned to ice. Somebody ain't just disrespecting me, I whispered. They stealing from me. And I knew it then. I may be old, but I ain't blind. I wasn't losing my mind. I was watching it all happen, slow and steady, like a house sinking into its own foundation. After making some grits and eggs I couldn't bring myself to eat, I dressed quiet and neat, like I used to on Monday mornings when I had rounds to do. By 9, I was standing inside the same credit union I'd trusted for 22 years. The young clerk smiled politely, but I saw it, behind the courtesy. She was bracing herself for what she thought was a confused old lady moment. Maybe you forgot authorizing those transfers? She asked. I leaned in, looked her square. Baby, I may forget where I left my keys, I said, but I don't forget losing $48,000. That got her attention. She clicked her keyboard faster. Looks like these were online transfers, she said, brows lifting, all under digital authorization. I don't bank online. The screen refreshed and a name popped up. T. Massey. I felt my heartbeat slow instead of race. Fear was gone. What took its place was betrayal. And betrayal don't burn hot. It chills you from the inside out. I left without a fuss, told her thank you, walked straight to my car, sat there a while, door cracked open, Georgia breeze sliding across my face. I needed air to breathe what I now knew. That evening, while folding towels that didn't need folding, the phone rang. It was Alfreda. Odella, you heard Talindra's podcast? I paused. What podcast? Girl, she sighed, you need to listen. So I did, found it online. Talindra's voice came smooth, sweet, rehearsed. Some mothers-in-law just take up space, she said. They don't support us, they drain us. They act like they've earned a crown just because they birthed somebody. She didn't say my name, but she might as well have. She made herself sound like the one carrying the family, like I was dead weight. I sat on the edge of my couch, listening to my own erasure. That was the moment it hit me harder than any word she spoke at dinner. This wasn't about me being old or slow or forgetful. This was about making me disappear, first from the house, then from the bank account, and now from the story. They ain't killing me with knives, I said out loud. They doing it with stories. Varnell's voice came back to me like it never left. A thief will take your money, a coward will take your name. And that's what this was, a coward's game. This wasn't messy. It was orchestrated. She was laying bricks, building a whole new narrative, one where I was nothing but background noise. I didn't yell. I didn't knock on Keenan's door. Instead, I pulled out an old notebook, one with a broken lock I'd kept since 1983. On the front, I wrote in bold black ink, "If I disappear." Inside, I listed every date, every withdrawal, every amount, and then I whispered something only God and that notebook could hear. Let them think I'm slow. A storm moves slow too until it don't. I placed the notebook in my top drawer, locked it, then I picked up the phone. Alfreda, I said when she answered, I need you to find out who taught Talindra how to access online banking. She didn't ask questions. She just breathed heavy, like she knew this wasn't about money anymore. It was about war. I settled into the living room, trying to catch a breath of normalcy. But something felt hollow. My eyes traveled to the wall where my wedding photo had hung. Only the empty space stared back. That frame used to anchor our family's story. Now it's gone, and so it seems, is the memory of me. I ran my fingers along the shelf where grandchildren's pictures still stood. My own face slipping into obscurity felt heavier than any absent word. Talindra walked by without noticing my glance. She brushed past the wall, humming softly, like she owned every inch. No pause, no hesitation. Silence filled the hallway as though the walls themselves were aware of her rewriting. I thought, if a mother vanishes in her own home, does the house even remember her? That afternoon, Muriel slipped in and handed me her sketchbook, voice soft. Grandma, you're the one who stays even when no one asks you to. She'd drawn me holding her, surrounded by frowns. Talindra and her mother shadowed in the background. My heart twisted. This child still sees me in a world that's fading me out. I tucked her drawing into my Bible, careful, sacred. Next morning, sun beams through the family room. I walked forward, arms open for our embrace. I hugged myself instead. There sat Talindra's mother's portrait, glossy and bright where mine once lived. My lips thinned, throat tight. They didn't just remove a picture, they removed my right to be seen. Guests came in chatting lightly. No one mentioned the empty frame. I held back confrontation. I raised my own phone quietly and snapped the switch, proof. I leaned against the hallway wall. Memory hit me. Years ago, after a church fundraiser, I presented that very photo to the family. How proud I was, holding it high. Now it sat erased. Did I expect too much? I asked myself, recognition, was it vanity or dignity? Too late for second guess. The drawing and the vacancy floated inside me, uneasy company. I rearranged other frames, childhood pictures, grandkids' smiles, but left that empty square deliberately bare. I whispered to the dark corners, if they'll erase me, let my absence be louder than their lies. Then I closed the door behind me and let that erasure land. The kitchen used to smell like my mama's house on a Saturday. Sweet cornbread and something simmering low. Today it just smelled like lemon-scented cleaner in someone else's hands. I stood by the cabinet, searching for my good china. Gone. Replaced by gaudy plates with pink flowers that looked like they belonged in a discount motel. I didn't say a word. My hand moved to the towel rack. The ones I stitched with my initials were gone too. In their place, plain beige cloths that felt like paper in my fingers. I stepped toward the front door and stared. The sign I made 23 years ago, "Welcome to the Doss home," was gone. Hung instead was a new one. The Moore residence, no announcement, no discussion, just done, like I was no longer part of the address. I sat down at the kitchen table with my hands folded in my lap. I looked around like it was a crime scene. The evidence was subtle but loud. They weren't just moving in, they were replacing me. One fork, one towel, one memory at a time. Later that evening, the yard filled up. The grill smoked, kids ran wild. Neighbors waved over the fence. I brought out a salad I'd made, placed it quietly on the table next to the meats. Talindra didn't look my way. Later, I heard her say to one of the guests, "I made that fresh." Two. Nobody questioned her. Someone cracked a joke loud enough to echo, "Looks like Talindra runs this house now." Laughter, even from folks who knew better. I smiled, that fake kind that don't reach your eyes. Took a sip of lemonade to push down the heat crawling up my throat. One lady leaned in and whispered, "You okay, Adela?" I nodded. Line number 412. While the ribs were finishing on the grill, I asked Chase to walk with me by the shed. We didn't get far before I said, "Son, she's not just taking over this house, she's replacing me in your life." He rubbed his thumb against the rim of his plastic cup. "Mama, don't start this now, please." No eye contact. That boy couldn't look at me. "You'll regret letting silence speak for you," I told him. He didn't argue, didn't fight, just walked away. And in that silence, I recognized something. I'd worn that same expression when my own mama tried to warn me about my first husband. Pride and guilt wrestling behind the eyes. Back inside, I walked into the kitchen and saw Talindra's mother standing over my cast iron skillet. My skillet, the one I seasoned for years through burn marks and Sunday brunch. She flipped sausage like it was hers. I almost opened my mouth, but closed it again. This wasn't the time. That night I sat on my bed, pen in hand. I started a new list, not groceries, not chores. It was titled, "Things They Took Without Permission." The skillet, the china, my name from the mailbox, my silence. I didn't pray for calm, I prayed for strength. They think I'm quiet because I'm soft, but some storms don't come to disrupt your life. They come to clear your path. After church, the house felt heavy. The midday sun pressed through lace curtains, but the air inside was colder. I was putting dishes in the sink when I caught Talindra's voice over the phone. Her tone so loud I paused. She called me a relic, speaking with that practiced cruelty. She wouldn't even notice if we moved her into a home tomorrow. Her laughter clipped. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from guilt and rage that spent too long bottled. My mama's voice rang in my memory. Sometimes you gotta speak or they'll write your story without you. I drew in a shuddered breath. Not today. When guests strolled into the yard for brunch, I didn't shrink. I stepped into the kitchen and waited until I saw everyone gathered, nieces, uncles, cousins, all here. Then I spoke. Talindra, what you just said in that kitchen meant to erase me. I voiced it loud and clear. She flushed, laughed nervously. I didn't falter. I named what they'd stolen, my skillet, my photographs, that heirloom scarf I wore on our anniversary. She stammered, tried to interrupt. I pressed on. I've earned my place in this home, not borrowed it. Guests hushed, foreheads furrowed. The air stung with accusation. Talindra snapped back. She accused me of being emotionally manipulative. She claimed I used my age and kindness as weapons. She's got everyone fooled, she spat. Master manipulator with a god complex. Chase looked away. Absence louder than defense. My chest contracted, not from her words, but from how shared silence hung in the room. Then she pulled out a printed journal entry from grief counseling, my private thoughts laid bare as proof of insanity. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I spoke softly but pointedly. Let the record show, the one you call unstable is the one who raised 3 boys, 2 careers, and this home. I said it slow, so they felt each word. If I were weak, I added, you wouldn't have to work so hard to bury me. Murmurs crept around the yard. A guest whispered, she's been through hell for this family. I stood tall and walked out of the circle of tension, onto the front steps, leaving them with their shadows. I pulled out my notebook, the one with bullet points, items stolen, erasures made. I crossed out today's date. Under it, spoken truth, received silence. Muriel appeared carrying tea in her small hand. I sat. She slipped her fingers into mine. No words, just presence. The night stretched around us. I heard the echo. When they can't control your voice, they'll try to control your sanity. They thought silence would be my defeat, but that day I reclaimed what was mine. I almost skipped the block party, but I needed to show up, not for them, but for me. The Saturday sun leaned low, but it was still hot, humid, Georgia heat clinging to everyone's skin. I carried my dish, my old casserole pan tucked under my arm, walked quietly past neighbours, whispering at their porches. Word had already spread. Something was wrong in the Doss household. I passed Talindra at the gate, her smile too perfect, her hands doing a show for the neighbourhood crowd. I didn't nod, I didn't smile. This wasn't her stage. When I found a seat, I didn't sink to the back. Instead, I placed myself near the front, under shade but in view. Eyes flickered. I felt weight shift in glances. I kept my notebook secure in my purse, my shield of truths not yet spoken. Chase arrived late, avoiding me, choosing her side instead of ours. I saw the tilt of his posture. It said he belonged over there now. I told myself, I am no longer pleading for their version of peace. Weldon Tibbs came up behind me while the music played softly. He paused, cleared his throat, and spoke in front of several neighbours. Odella, he said gently but with force, I signed the papers thinking you approved them. He told me you were sick, couldn't contest. I wouldn't have done it if I knew. The yard went quiet. Conversation stopped mid-laugh. Talindra froze like a statue. Weldon added, I believed them, I'm sorry. The crack in her composure wasn't small, it was a blow. Muriel stood beside me then, clearing her throat. She looked toward the crowd, voice calm. Grandma's not sick. She's the one who cares for me when everyone else walks away. A hush moved through the guests. They leaned in. Talindra flinched, tried to shush the child. Muriel held onto her skirt. I pressed my hand over hers. That small squeeze, solidarity in silence. I stood, walked forward slowly. I didn't raise my voice, didn't shout. I said, I didn't come here to argue. I came to be seen. I let those words hang. Some people nodded, others averted eyes. Shame flickered in wounded faces. I felt not victory, but relief. Relief that the curtain dropped for once. As I stepped away, Talindra leaned in behind me and hissed, "You don't know what you've just started." I didn't spin around. I whispered over my shoulder, "And you don't know what I can finish." The halls of the community centre smelled like polished wood and nervous breath. I arrived early, alone, my notebook tucked against my chest. Long-time neighbours passed and offered quiet nods. Some said, "Are you okay?" as if I were made of glass. The rumour mill had churned hard since Weldon's revelation. Talindra entered last, hair perfect, lips curved in confidence. She scanned faces, posed like a queen entering court. I sat near the back, fingers tapping my notebook. Eyes shifted. I watched her look away. When the moderator called the meeting open, the room fell still. Talindra's mother began softly, painting me as overstepping. "Pushing where she shouldn't," she said. Heads nodded quietly in the shadows. I stood, heart steady though throat tight. "I did not ask for this stage," I said. "I came for the truth." My voice travelled better than I expected, not loud but felt. It landed among them unsettled. Talindra snapped to her feet and demanded control. She leaned into the mic and accused me of playing the victim for years. She held up pages, journal entries out of context. Words twisted. The hall's hum turned to murmurs. Some backs turned, others leaned closer. She replied to criticism. "You want sympathy, so I'll give you chaos." She leaned back, chest proud, arms crossed, waiting for applause that never came. Moderator called Weldon to speak. He stepped forward, guilt and shame etched in his voice. "I signed those papers under pressure," he said. "I believed what Talindra told me. I thought you were ill. I was wrong." A gasp rolled through the crowd. Talindra's face lost colour. I felt wind shift, as though the room itself exhaled. The lie they built began to crack. I rose, knees trembling, but I spoke clear. "You tore my name from every frame. You turned silence into my cage, but you cannot silence truth." I held up Muriel's drawing and the ledger screenshot. Some leaned forward, others covered their mouths, a few clapped soft. Shock spread like a tide. I refused to let her define me. Talindra stood, lips parted, but no retaliation came. She glared instead, wordless. I stepped off the platform, Muriel at my side. I whispered into the hush, "I told you silence would grow loud." I set the table myself that Sunday evening. No flowers, no china, no soft music to suggest peace, just 4 plain plates and water glasses. I wanted everything bare. Let the silence do the decorating. When they walked in, Keenan first, then Talindra right behind him, they stopped the moment they saw the table. Nobody sat. They hovered, unsure if they'd been called to dinner or judgment. "This is not supper," I said, resting my hand on the chair that once belonged to Varnell. "This is a settlement." Nobody reached for their seat. I could hear their breathing. Keenan looked thinner, eyes sunken. Talindra stood stiff, arms locked across her chest, like she feared even the air might accuse her. I didn't offer grace. I didn't offer small talk. Keenan spoke first, voice hollow. "Mama, before you start, I lost my job." His throat cracked. "They let me go Friday. HR said ethical conflict. They got copies of that podcast, emails, stuff I never thought." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I saw it in his shoulders. Shame finally found him, not because he betrayed me, but because others finally saw it. Talindra rolled her eyes. "This is ridiculous. People lose jobs every day. They'll hire you back once this passes." I didn't blink. "It won't pass," I said, "because this is not misfortune. This is consequence." His eyes lifted to mine. For the first time in months, he looked like a son. Lost, looking for ground. but I couldn't hand him shelter. Shelter is earned. I reached into my folder and laid the first stack of papers on the table. Bank records, I said quietly. $48,000 wired to T. Massey, withdrawals made from my account, under my name. Talindra stepped forward. I went through what belonged to me, I cut in, calm, precise. You forged what you couldn't earn. Bettine, who had stayed quiet in the corner, gasped. I caught her hand trembling against her purse. She knew. She just never knew I knew. I laid the second folder down. Emails, plans with Xandra Holloway, discussing transfer, discussing selling assets, using my name to fund your freedom. Talindra reached out to snatch the documents. I pulled them back before her fingers touched the page. You don't touch truth only when it suits you, I said. Her face reddened. You're enjoying this. You're trying to ruin us. I leaned forward. I don't have to ruin you. You did that when you thought I was too old to notice. The room still hadn't seen the final blow. I opened the envelope Varnell left locked in the attic, the one I almost forgot existed until betrayal sharpened my memory. I placed the will on the table like a final trump card. My husband's secondary will, I said, signed, sealed, witnessed. My name stays on this house, on every acre, on all funds. No transfer can occur without me. Talindra's mouth opened, but no sound came. It includes a clause, I continued. Any party engaging in financial misconduct can be legally removed from the premises with immediate effect. That was the moment the room changed temperature. Pride drained out of her like fever breaking. And Keenan, he closed his eyes. He knew what came next. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a single accusation. I didn't need to. Mothers don't beg, I said, rising slowly. We decide. I turned to Keenan. You lost more than work. You lost your reflection. Somewhere along the line, you traded it for silence. Can you find it again? He looked down, not at his wife, at himself. I turned to Talindra. You built your life on image. Now face it without your mask. She said through clenched teeth, You can't do this to us. I pulled my chair back calmly. I already did the moment I stood up. I left them there, standing in the wreckage they created. No more speeches, no threats, just truth folded neatly in paper. As I reached the doorway, I heard her whisper behind me, voice cracking for the first time. What are we supposed to do now? I didn't look back. Live with it, I said, and I walked out, leaving them at a table finally set with reality. It was quiet the next morning, the kind of quiet that doesn't ring with emptiness, but with relief. No cars in the driveway, no chairs left out on the porch. Keenan and Talindra were gone. They didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note, just packed their shame and vanished. The neighbors knew without needing details. Folks at the market looked at me with something softer than pity. Respect, maybe. I found 2 casseroles on my front steps. No names attached, just heat and kindness. I walked through town later that afternoon, past storefronts that had been there longer than my grief, past corners that used to echo with my children's laughter before pride made them strangers. My feet slowed as I reached the mural on the side of the community center. My husband, painted broad-shouldered and smiling. I stood there for a long while, watching the breeze nudge leaves across his face. I thought forgiveness meant being quiet, I said aloud. But all I did was teach them how to erase me. His smile stayed steady on the brick wall. I could almost hear his voice, low and certain. You always had the strength, baby. You just forgot where you kept it. That afternoon I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger. I just felt the weight lift, like my bones had finally remembered how to stand without apology. The following Saturday, I sent a message to Lila's aunt, asking if the little one could help me restart the garden behind the church. Lila showed up with 2 friends and a pair of gloves, too big for her hands. We dug together, pulling weeds that had been choking out the last season's roots. One of the church elders passed by with a watering can, looked at our messy hands and chuckled. When someone shows you who they are, she said, believe them the first time. I didn't flinch, I didn't wince. I smiled, not from bitterness, but because the truth sat with me like an old friend now. That afternoon, a local journalist stopped by. Young girl, big glasses, said she wanted to write a piece on healing through heritage. I nodded. Let me finish planting these tomatoes, I said, then I'll tell you everything that matters. Later that evening, as the sun started dipping low, I sat on my porch with my knitting in my lap. The air smelled like cut grass and distant barbecue. Nothing special, but it was mine. Letters from Keenan had started arriving, one every week, no begging, just trying to understand what he'd become. I hadn't written back, not because I hated him, but because healing isn't a round trip. Sometimes you walk the road alone until you can breathe again. I reached beside me and touched the framed photo of my mother, that hard woman with hands like prayer and discipline. She taught me that love could be fierce and still be tender. I became her after all, I murmured, just with a little more fight in my soul. Not long after that, I met with the shelter board and transferred part of the house fund into my late husband's memorial account. Told them to use it for mothers who'd been made small in their own homes, and I named the new garden after Bettine, because even with her silence, she never turned her back when it counted. That night, I pulled out my phone and recorded a voice memo. For my great-grandbabies, whenever they find this, be smart, be kind, but don't let nobody write your story but you. I smiled into the dark, not because I'd won, but because I never lost myself. Sometimes strength looks like walking away, and sometimes it looks like staying and planting something that'll bloom after you're gone.